we're left with something of a puzzle when we say we don't quite know how language arose. Um, we've no simple evolutionary story to tell there. But we were looking at language simply as um, one remarkable thing that either is there or not. Evolution is a messy process. It works on entire bodies and ecosystems and changes everything all at once. It's quite possible that something happened in our evolutionary history that affected the development of language without itself necessarily being anything obviously linguistic in the sense of words, sentences. So we do have a lot of uncertainty here, but we have noted a few interesting things, and I'd like to draw one to your attention, which was, it's a speculative hypothesis produced in 2007, and it documents one single biological change, which might potentially and perhaps plausibly be of great importance in this story. Evolution works very, very slowly, and to expect a single biological change to produce the whole of language seems implausible. But a small biological change not in the brain might be relevant. Among all the great apes are the humans, the gorillas, the chimpanzees, the bonobos, and the orangutans. Among all those, only humans have white eyeballs. The white of the eye, that's called the sclera of the eye. And because we have white eyeballs with a dark center, the pupil and the iris, it's very easy to see where someone is looking. That is, it's very easy to see what they're paying attention to. And this is not the case for the other apes. So this has developed into what Michael Tomasello has called the cooperative eye hypothesis. What we see in the change in color on the eyeball is the kind of small change that evolution makes. It's a small biological change, purposeless, but possibly of great consequence. Because if you can clearly see where someone else is looking, you can enter into their world, you can pay attention with them to the same kinds of things. And it's true that for human infants, it's very easy for them to tell where their caregivers, their parents, are looking. And they become actually quite expert at this. So from a very early age, in fact from birth pretty much, humans are enveloped in a sea of joint attention. Parents sit with them, look at the same things as them. We're always very sensitive to where people are looking. If you're not convinced of this, just go try and stare at someone. And if you stare at someone long enough, you'll probably get punched. We're very sensitive to where other people are staring. So this is not going to give us all the detail of language, but the fact that we are so wrapped up in each other's business suggests itself as an important point in the development of language, which is, after all, a means for coordinating, for working together, for solving problems together. Now we know that children as young as 9 months will look to see where their caregivers are looking. And by the end of the first year, they'll be able to look at their caregiver and then follow the gaze of the caregiver to see what the caregiver is looking at. And before they're a year and a half old, those little Machiavellian infants can actually influence the caregiver to look where the infant wants them to go. So this business of jointly looking at things could be an important part of the story of where language comes from. On this note, and just for a little light relief, look at these 3 eyes. On the top you have a human eye, and you can see the clear signal of gaze because the eyeball is white and the center of the eye is dark. And below that you see a chimpanzee, and the eyes are dark, so it's very difficult to tell exactly where a chimpanzee is looking. Incidentally, researchers have found that chimpanzees are interested in where other chimpanzees are looking, but they don't use the direction of the eye as their signal. They use the direction of their head, which is a much cruder way. If I keep my head perfectly steady, I can still vary my gaze a whole lot. And if we were face to face, you would notice that very clearly. And notice what the last picture does. It's not a real ape, it's from the Planet of the Apes. But look how shifty and intelligent that ape suddenly looks because of the white eyeballs. Those are human eyeballs. So this is a very, perhaps an unusual way of looking at language as arising from sharing worlds together, arising from doing things together. I want to encourage many different ways of looking at language. One way of looking at language is that it helps us to get things done. It's a tool that solves problems, and it's been enormously efficacious. Humans have developed civilizations, have taken over and almost destroyed the planet, largely because we have language at our disposal. Here's a little experiment that was done that shows what a powerful tool language is. In fact, we're not even going to use language here. We're going to use just the minimal linguistic ability to name something. If you can attach a label to something, if you can name it, say this is a pot, this is a vase, you might think that's a very simple and innocuous kind of thing, but we'll see that it actually can help you to solve some problems. And we're going to look here not at humans, but at apes, in fact chimpanzees. Research on the great apes in the interests of uncovering their language abilities or inabilities was popular in the 1970s, maybe up to the 1980s. It's not really done, maybe 1990s, but it's not something that's really done anymore. Our feelings, our sentiments collectively towards animals are always changing. And the more we learn about the great apes, the more we learn how similar we are to them, and the more discomfort we feel at performing experiments on them. But anyway, this is a historical experiment and was done using two chimpanzees. You can see Sheba and Sarah there. Now, Sheba has been trained to play a particular game. In this particular game, the researcher repeatedly comes out with 2 plates of treats. And there's more treats on one plate than on the other. The researcher brings these 2 plates and presents them to Sheba, and beside Sheba is another chimpanzee, Sarah. Sarah is not trained in the game, she's just there to sit there. Sheba will now point to one of these 2 plates, and the plate that she points to is the one that Sarah is going to get. So Sheba gets the plate she doesn't point to. Now, if the researcher brings out the plates and the treats are visible, Sheba can't help herself. She always points at the one with more treats. So if this one has more treats, Sheba points to it. But if she points to it, the researcher gives it to Sarah, and Sheba gets frustrated because she didn't get the biggest plate. And this happens again and again and again. Somehow Sheba, when presented with 2 plates of treats, can't help herself because she wants the one with more. That's the one she's going to point to. But Sheba has been trained in the use of numbers, and numbers are a kind of label. So if we introduce the treats and we have a covering over them with a number on the outside, let's say this one says 5 and this one says 3, Sheba knows what those numbers mean. She knows there's 5 treats under here and 3 treats under here. Under these conditions, Sheba is able to point to the one with the smaller number and make sure that she gets the one with more treats. So there's an important difference here. When directly confronted with the treats, she always points to the bigger pile and gets very frustrated. When there's a label that intervenes between her and the treats, she somehow has the ability to distance herself from the problem, to think it through, and to act more in her own interest. So it seems here that this use of the labels numbers seems to have freed Sheba up from the direct link between seeing and doing. Now, again, this is just suggestive, and we can only learn so much from apes, given that they don't have language, but it does suggest that even the ability to name things can allow an animal very like us to solve problems in the world that it can't do without names. I said that this kind of research is not really done today. All those chimpanzees from there typically live in this place called Chimp Haven. Sheba was alive and well last year. I think she may have passed on in the last year. I'm not sure. These chimpanzees are getting very old. Right.